Hi guys, Olive here. Today I am very excited to talk to you about the best books that I've read so far in 2018. In this video I will be talking about 9 different books that I have read so far this year that really stand out as my best reading experiences. 4 of the 9 books are nonfiction, while the remaining 5 are fiction, and I have ranked these books in ascending level of enjoyment, so you will hear about my very favorite reads of the year so far at the end of the video. I will be both beginning and ending this video talking about fiction books, so my 5th favorite fiction book that I've read so far this year was The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. This book was released just this year in 2018 and has been a very hyped piece of literary fiction, considering that Meg Wolitzer is a very well-known name in the literary world. This is a book that discusses the real-life challenges of being in a relationship that starts when you are very young. It displays the potential hazards as well as the potential benefits that come from seeking an idol, and it also illustrates the potential loss of self that comes with being a recognizable person. It is a book that I felt really connected to, and not just because of Meg Wolitzer's extremely strong presence on the page, especially when she is writing group dynamics, but because of the personal connection I felt to both of the female main characters who were experiencing things at different stages in their lives. I know that many people, including people here on BookTube, have expressed criticism of this book for a variety of different reasons. But personally, I felt that this book succeeded in showcasing everything that it intended to in every regard. My 4th favorite nonfiction book that I have read so far this year is Smarter, Faster, Better by Charles Duhigg. I read this book because I placed it on my young professional TBR, and I was certainly not surprised that I loved it as much as I did, considering how much I adored his previous book, The Power of Habit. Both of the Charles Duhigg books that I have read seek to explain psychological phenomena using very accessible and entertaining anecdotes that help you get a better handle on why your brain works the way it does, and give you a roadmap to help you intervene in some of these natural processes if necessary. Charles Duhigg continues to be an author that I can recommend to just about anyone, especially people looking to get into nonfiction, because not only are his books really informative, but they are just a great time to read. My 4th favorite fiction book so far this year was definitely The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is a book that I picked at random off of my TBR that surprised me in the best possible way. This is a multi-generational family tale in which we are first following a young Indian couple in an arranged marriage who moved to America. They somewhat accidentally end up naming their first child a son after the husband/father's favorite Russian author, who he happened to be reading when he was nearly killed in a tragic train accident. As the book goes on, our focus moves to Gogol and his experience being the child of an immigrant family and the different ways in which he has to straddle 2 different cultures. Throughout the second part of the novel, we see the agonies and the ecstasies of his love life, and we see his complicated relationship with the name that his parents gave him, and everything it represents. This was a lovely yet poignant read that has stuck in my brain ever since I finished it. Moving on to the 2 books that rank in 3rd place, the next nonfiction book I would like to talk to you about is Smoke It's in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory by Caitlin Doughty. This is the memoir of mortician as well as fellow YouTuber Caitlin Doughty, and how she first became interested in death and dying, and ultimately how she moved to actually work in the death industry. This has been a very popular nonfiction book here on BookTube over the past few years, and for good reason. There are so many good discussions in this book about how we all need to be having more regular and healthier discussions about death and dying, since it is not something that stops happening simply because we are unwilling to confront it. The entire book feels like a conversation with its reader about the ways in which we could make death less of a taboo subject, and how, if we did so, we could make the death industry better as a result. I read this book at a very strange, yet also very fortuitous time, because it was a time in my life where I needed to be able to talk and hear about death and dying and grief in any kind of a positive way, but I do believe that I would have connected to this memoir regardless of when I read it. Caitlin Doughty's voice in this book is so honest, it's surprisingly enough really upbeat, and it is endlessly true to herself. The fiction book that comes in third place is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a piece of contemporary fiction set in the present day, in which golden age movie star Evelyn Hugo spontaneously contacts a random newbie journalist at a popular women's magazine because for the first time ever, she is going to divulge her entire infamous life story so that this random newbie journalist can write her biography. For the first time ever, she plans to tell this journalist the story behind her 7 different husbands. The stories that she tells are surprising, scandalous, and completely riveting to the point that it makes you forget the question that is at the core of this novel, which is, why did Evelyn Hugo, movie star of the golden age of Hollywood, choose this random newbie journalist to be the one to write this book for her? This book has had nearly universal praise across BookTube as well as the greater bookish internet, and let me tell you, it deserves all of it. I think if you give this book a chance, it will really surprise you and definitely completely blow you away. Going back to nonfiction, the second best book that I have read in that genre so far this year is definitely The Curse of the Boyfriend Sweater by Alana Oken. This is a collection of essays on crafting, specifically knitting, sewing, and crocheting, but each one of them goes into something much deeper. And those are topics like family, friendship, love, and grief. Although essays with these messages could potentially come off as heavy-handed, I assure you that this essay collection puts on no airs, and it is so touching because it is so humble and delicate in its execution. This was another nonfiction book that I somehow managed to read at exactly the right time, because in a few of her essays, Alana Oken discusses losing her grandmother, which was particularly hard on her since her grandmother was the one who introduced her to crafting. And very shortly before I read this book, I had just gone through the loss of my own grandmother. So to say the least, I found this book extremely moving, and if you would like to hear more of my thoughts on this book, I did an entire review of it that I will link down below. My second favorite fiction book that I've read so far this year is The Unseen World by Liz Moore. This is yet another one that has received a ton of praise on BookTube and that completely deserves it. This book is about the daughter of a computer genius who works in a lab studying artificial intelligence. But as her father gradually starts to lose his memory, our main character, Ada, is forced to be taken in by some of her father's co-workers. And as they are getting her father's affairs in order, arranging care for him now that he no longer has his memories intact, they discover that he is not who he has claimed to be during Ada's entire life. Ada spends the rest of her formative years trying to solve the puzzle of who her father was really. And the entire book reads like a really sad jigsaw puzzle, but one that you just can't stop doing. This was the very first book that I finished in 2018, and I just could not have started the year off with a better book. The best nonfiction book that I have read so far this year, without a doubt, is Lab Girl by Hope Jahren. It seems as though I have a special place in my heart for memoirs this year, which is not all that surprising considering it has turned out to be a rather transformative year in my own life. This is Hope Jaren's story of growing up, being fascinated by plant life, moving on to then study geobiology, work at several different labs, and eventually open up her own lab. But interspersed throughout her story are all the scientific facts that make up her worlds. She discusses the function of roots and leaves. She explains the important role that trees play in our natural worlds. And she also warns us about the dangers facing the earth because of human impacts. This is a fabulous nonfiction book in every regard. Hope Jahren tells her story so beautifully. She explains the science so effortlessly. And if you consume this book on audiobook, as I did, she lends her own voice to telling her story in such a raw, honest, and emotional way. I really couldn't imagine experiencing this book in any other fashion but on audiobook for that reason. And while I am overflowing with love here, I would also like to tell you what my favorite fiction book of the year so far has been. That is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This isn't entirely surprising considering my favorite book of 2017 was Wives and Daughters, but I may have loved North and South even more than I loved Wives and Daughters. Like most of the Victorian novels that I enjoy, we are focused on a young heroine, but what is different about North and South is that her family undergoes a crisis early in the book, and as a result are forced to move to a northern industrial town that was clearly based on Manchester. Both the industry and the society of this town are centered around the mills that exist there, and our main character, Margaret, interacts with mill owners as well as mill workers, and is very clearly able to see the misunderstandings and the animosity between the classes. I love that Elizabeth Gaskell wasn't afraid to show the real harmful side effects of industrial life, and I also really like that she made misunderstanding such a central theme of this book. I've never read characters that I've come to love more than ones I've met in Elizabeth Gaskell novels, and the deep affection that I felt for this book throughout my reading experience solidified Elizabeth Gaskell's place on my favorite authors list. So those are all of my favorite books of 2018 so far, but of course the year isn't over yet. I'm really looking forward to all the reading that I'm going to be doing in the second half of the year, and I'm very genuinely curious to see if any or all of these books will make it on my official year-end favorites list. I find it very hard to believe that any fiction or nonfiction will displace my current top 2, but hey, you never know what's going to happen. If you have read any of these books, if you've heard about any of these books, or if you would like to now read them after hearing me talk about them, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below, or you can find me on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles are linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.